10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. We have ignition.
Apollo 8, Houston, over.
Go ahead, Houston.
Roger, we are going to rewind your tape recorder, and we have the TLI plus 90 and TLI plus 4-hour pads at your convenience, over. Apollo 8, Houston, over.
Copy.
Apollo 8, Houston, we're picking you up now over Bermuda. I did not copy your readback after Delta VC. That was the last quantity I received.
Roger, Houston, can you give us the sextant information?
December 21st, 1968. The shortest day of the year, but in significance, perhaps one of the longest in the flow of history.
This is Apollo Saturn Launch Control. We are still go at this time. T-minus 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9. We have ignition sequence start. The engines are armed. 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. We have commit. We have liftoff. Liftoff at 7:51 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We have cleared the top.
Tower clear, 13 seconds.
The United States was undertaking the most distant voyage ever attempted by man. For the first time, 3 Americans rode the Saturn V moon rocket.
Apollo 8, Houston, you are go for staging, over. Roger, understand, sir.
Apollo 8?
We hear you loud and clear, Apollo 8.
Okay, the first stage was very smooth, and this one is smoother.
On board the spacecraft and in mission control, the men of Apollo 8 watched the readouts. Velocity buildup in feet per second. The numbers snowballing toward the velocity that would allow the spacecraft to escape Earth's gravity.
Okay, we got Cinco.
And Borman says we've got Seco. Cutoff was right on the second.
With the cutoff of their third stage engine, Apollo 8 was traveling faster than had any men before, a coasting uphill climb against the pull of their native planet. Now the third stage, the S-4B, was just useless mass to them. It was jettisoned, then later placed into an orbit around the sun. The crew of Apollo 8 turned around for a look.
Houston, Apollo 8, how do you read? You're loud and clear, Frank. How is it? Give us clues to what it looks like from way up there.
Roger. I can see the entire Earth now out of the center window. I can see Florida, Cuba, Central America, Chile.
You picked a good day for it.
The crew of Apollo 8 now settled down to the routine of the outward flight. Systems checks, observations, navigational star sightings.
Jim, they've just been looking at your marks with respect to accuracy, and they figure they're within a couple thousandths of a degree of the theoretical optimum.
Then, on the second day out, the world looked in on the crew via television.
This transmission is coming to you approximately halfway between the moon and the Earth. We've been 31 hours, about 20 minutes into flight. We have about less than 40 hours left to go to the moon.
Lunar orbit insertion would take place on the backside of the moon. With the moon between the spacecraft and the Earth, all contact would be lost until it appeared on the other side. In mission control, they anticipated LOS, loss of signal, from Apollo 8.
We'll see you on the other side.
Now, mission control and the world could only wait. Wait for the first contact with Apollo 8 as it emerged from behind the moon.
We've got it. We've got it. Apollo 8 now in lunar orbit. There's a cheer in this room. This is Apollo Control Houston, switching now to the voice of Jim Lovell.
By 60.5. Good to hear your voice.
The burn was as close to perfect as possible. Later burns would circularize the orbit, and the 3 astronauts would circle the moon 10 times in 20 hours. Sunrise, sunset, every 2 hours on an alien world. And they would take pictures, still photographs as well as motion picture film, here seen at a much faster rate than orbital velocity.
Apollo 8, Houston, what does the old moon look like from 60 miles, over?
Okay, Houston, the moon is essentially gray, no color, looks like plaster of Paris, or sort of a grayish beach sand. We can see quite a bit of detail. The craters are all rounded off. There's quite a few of them. Some of them are newer. Many of them look like, especially the round ones, look like hit by meteorites or projectiles of some sort.
There was little time for the crew of Apollo 8 to reflect. The next job was to make sure that the spacecraft was ready for the most critical maneuver of the mission, the firing of the service module engine for TEI, trans-Earth insertion, and the trip home. There was no go, no-go decision on this one. It had to go.
All systems are go, Apollo 8.
Thank you.
For the final time, Apollo 8 passed behind the moon, out of contact with Earth, for this most critical of all the burns. On the ground, men waited.
Apollo 8, Houston. Apollo 8, Houston. Apollo 8, Houston. Apollo 8, Houston.
Apollo 8, over.
Hello, Apollo 8. Loud and clear.
Roger. Please be informed there is a Santa Claus.
That's affirmative. You're the best ones to know.
We were enjoying the holiday, in the Christian world, Christmas, and we paused for a moment in our celebrations to watch 3 travelers heading home. As many of us sat down to our Christmas meal, Borman, Lovell, and Anders were enjoying theirs.
It appears that we did a grave injustice to the food people. Santa Claus brought us a TV dinner each, which is delicious. Turkey and gravy, cranberry sauce, grape punch, outstanding.
Roger, Jim. Glad to hear it. You know, we're down here eating cold coffee and bologna sandwiches.
On schedule, the command module jettisoned the service module to expose the main heat shield, aligned itself to entry attitude, and slammed into the atmosphere at 25,000 miles per hour, faster than man had ever traveled until Apollo 8. With the temperature on the heat shield reaching 5,000 degrees, the communications were blacked out. A tracking aircraft took these films of the entry, the spacecraft seen as an incandescent fireball.
We have no words or no indication yet whether on the attitude of the spacecraft, whether it's nose down, as was the case in Apollo 7, or up. But nearly everyone agrees it's only 5,000 yards away from the Yorktown. Frank Borman is making small talk with the crew of that helicopter out there. It was just relayed to us that he had, in chatting with the pilot, he'd asked him if anyone had seen the spacecraft on Main Chute, and of course there were several reports, and this has become the subject of a continuing chat. In conversation with the helicopter commander, the crew commander, apparently the helicopter, asked the crew what the moon was made out of, whereupon Borman responded, it's not made out of green cheese at all, it's made out of American cheese.
It has been estimated that at some time or another during the flight of Apollo 8, over 1 billion people all over the face of the globe were tuned into the spacecraft by television or radio. the experience was most widely shared. The astronauts return to the world of men, but there's more. A week to the day after the Apollo 8 splashdown, another Apollo spacecraft had taken up its position on Pad 39 at Cape Kennedy. The countdowns by calendar and clock have begun to bring it to the same moment at which we first saw this Apollo 8 the night before it was born. As launch windows open and close, the next missions move forward. 2 test flights of the lunar landing vehicle, and then the proposed landing on the moon.
Apollo 8, Houston, over. Apollo 8, Houston, we're picking you up now over Bermuda. I did not copy your readback after Delta VC. That was the last quantity I received.